Bienvenidos hoy a Monstro Lune, the Carrion Crawler. All right, my friends, by request from one of my faithful fans, James R.A. Woodwright, I bring to you today for Monster Monday, the Carrion Crawler. Now, Carrion Crawlers are one of those monsters that's been around. Dave, do you see that? Is it coming through nice and clear? A little bit of, is it a little bit douchey or is it okay? Looks good? Okay, so Carrion Crawlers have been around since first edition D&D. Basically imagine a big old fat centipede, like a giant centipede with lots of nasty things, and it likes to dwell in filth amongst the dead, amongst carrion or other rotting material. And when I think of the Carrion Crawler, I think of a pest creature. This is like the kind of thing that you could put in like any dungeon, any cavern crawl, in the Underdark, in mines. You could put these in a lot of different places. So how to implement them is pretty easy. So let's break this down. I want to go through the stats for 5th edition, then we'll talk about ways to include them in encounters, and then maybe bigger components with adventures and whole campaigns. So if you're following along at home, this is on your Monster Manual, page 37. Carrion Crawlers scour putrid flesh from carcasses and gobble the slimy bones that remain. They aggressively attack any creature that trespasses on their territory or disturbs their feasting. Okay, DM tip right there, first paragraph, already given me some ideas. Carrion Eaters. A Carrion Crawler follows the scent of death to its food, but it prefers not to compete with other scavengers. These foul creatures thus hunker down in territories where death is plentiful, and other Carrion Eaters have limited mobility. Caves, sewers, dungeons, and forested marshes are their favored lairs. But Carrion Crawlers are also drawn to battlefields and cemeteries. That right there, that paragraph just gave you a whole boatload of options for how to include these guys. A Carrion Crawler roams on the hunt, its tentacles probing the air for the scent of blood or decay. In tunnels or ruins, Carrion Crawlers scurry across the ceiling as they move toward food. In this way, they avoid contact with oozes, otiufs, and other dangerous inhabitants of the darkness, even as they surprise potential meals that don't think to look up. Patient predators. Whether in subterranean darkness or while hunting at night, light signals a potential meal. A Carrion Crawler might follow a light source from a distance for hours, hoping to pick up the scent of blood. Despite their great size, Carrion Crawlers can also easily set up ambushes by waiting around blind corners for prey to come to them. When facing potential prey or intruders, a Carrion Crawler lets its poison do the work. Once a victim goes rigid with paralysis, the Carrion Crawler wraps it with its tentacles and drags it away to a high ledge or isolated passageway where it can be killed safely. The monster then resumes patrolling its territory while waiting for its meal to ripen. Okay, so already we have a lot of ideas. How do you use Carrion Crawlers in encounters? Very easily. They're a challenge rating of 2, which is not terribly difficult to deal with for even a low-level party if you have 1 of these things. If you want to scale this up, as I've always said, you can make adjustments to things like hit points, make adjustments to their attack, make adjustments to the quantity of these things that you're throwing at a party. So even for a mid-level party, 6 of these things might be a challenge. Where I'd like to start with encounters is let's go back through this and start with all the underground opportunities. So caves, sewers, dungeons. Let's start there. So pretty much any dungeon run, cave system, or sewer could have these things. Now what I would do as a DM is think about introducing them gradually to make it a little more interesting versus just like roll initiative okay? Because these are kind of big fat slugs, and they're not slow. I mean, they have a speed of 30 feet with a climbing speed of 30 feet, but they are large. So I don't think that if a party encounters them, they're going to be able to like socially manipulate their way out of this. It's going to be a fight or flight situation. But perhaps what you do is have kind of an initial encounter with one of these carrion crawlers. And that may or may not result in, you know, a little bit of damage to the party. Maybe somebody gets poisoned. But certainly not something where like the party would be in the threat of being wiped out. But where I think this could get interesting is a little bit of lore that's not mentioned here. But in previous editions, carrion crawlers laid eggs in specific places where they could produce a lot of eggs. Those eggs would hatch in like spoiled food or rotten meat or carcasses or, you know, garbage-ridden, sewage-ridden areas, which is, again, any dungeon, sewer, mine. When those eggs hatched, it would be just like a feeding frenzy of little baby carrion crawlers, who would then, in some cases, even eat each other if there wasn't ample food. Where I think this could get interesting is if you have a few of these carrion crawlers attack a party and maybe one member of the party gets taken off when they're poisoned / paralyzed, and the rest of the party has to go and recover them, then it's almost like the movie Aliens, where you have a kidnapped party member who's not dead yet. The party doesn't know if they're dead or not, but they know the direction in which the carrion crawler slinked off. And they track this down, right? They're chasing down the carrion crawler, and what they do is they arrive at a nest. So even though there's no stat block for baby carrion crawlers, it's really simple. All you do is basically, you know, shrink them down. You give them like a really feeble AC. Like even the adults only have a 13 AC, but maybe the babies you give like a 10 AC or an 8 AC. And you give them like less movement, and instead of their bite attack doing 2d4 plus do, maybe it just does 1d4 or just 1. But the poison in the babies could be something that you could still utilize. And that poison might not be as intense. It might only do 1 hit point of damage. But if you have a group who is going to rescue their fallen comrade or an NPC who's been taken away by the carrion crawlers, you could very easily have like 20 or 30 or 50 little baby carrion crawlers in this lair. And so to rescue their comrade, they have to defeat all these little babies. Meanwhile, the adults are also attacking them. So that's how you could take one chance encounter with a random wandering carrion crawler, bring it back to the lair, and it's now almost as if they have lair powers, which they don't have in the book. But that's my advice, is that you could take advantage of, you know, and you could even set it up almost like Aliens, like where you come into this larger cavern and you see all these little eggs all over the place kind of quivering. And as the party is trying to stealth through because they see their captured friend on a slab of stone, like across the way they're trying to stealth through, all it takes is one failed stealth check. And then the eggs start popping open and these little baby grub carrion crawlers start attacking. And yes, they could be killed with 1 attack, but if you have 20 or 30 of them, that can make for some difficult encounter. Now, I would say that if you're going to do this in the lair, maybe you also make it worth the party's efforts, because the carrion crawlers might have captured other people, other adventurers, and therefore there might be like random equipment, weapons, armor, maybe even a couple magical things or some coins from some of the bodies that were devoured. The carrion crawlers wouldn't eat those gems or the metals or whatever, so they would just be discarded. And that way there might be some incentive to kind of finishing off the lair. So that makes for several encounter options, whether you're in a dungeon, sewers, caves, caverns, whatever. Let's talk about above ground. How do you use carrion crawlers above ground? So they referenced a couple really good ideas. Foresty marshes, where there's a lot of like natural rotting material. you can have an ambush set up where, the group's going through this marsh and they kind of see like a little bit of an island in the marsh that's less swampy, and they kind of make their way to it. And they have to make a dex check or a perception check, whatever, and they don't notice, but there's like this pit, and they kind of fall into the pit, and there's a whole bunch of eggs and a couple carrion crawlers in there who would attack. That's maybe a marsh idea. Conversely, maybe you want to ramp up your game, and in this marsh you have a hag, and that hag kind of uses the carrion crawlers as like a perimeter defense. So the hag kind of is on her island, and she knows where these carrion crawlers are and how to avoid them, and they kind of are smart enough to avoid her, although they're not really smart. They have an intelligence of 1. So maybe they've instinctively learned over time not to go to the witch's little island in the marsh. But she knows where they are, and she's actually scooped up some of their eggs and helped facilitate their breeding so that they don't eat each other as much. So there's like a swamp just crawling with carrion crawlers, and she often uses them as her perimeter defense. So maybe that's another thing that you could do. Let's talk about in more urban environments. So a cemetery is one of the things they mention here. I'm thinking that if you have a cemetery near a town, or even outside of town, maybe you have some disturbances in the cemetery. Now this is kind of where we go from encounters to potential adventures. Maybe there are some disturbances recently in the cemetery where bodies of those who have recently been killed or have recently died of natural causes that have been buried in the cemetery have been dug up. And those plots have been dug up without, the parties maybe asked by the mayor or the sheriff or the constables to help find out what's going on. And through some investigation, roles or otherwise, they discover that these things were not dug up in a natural, like with tools, like with shovels. Very rough kind of digging was done, excavation, and that the bodies, that there's no pieces left. And then they follow the tracks of the carrion crawlers to like a cave that's not too far from the cemetery. That cave leads underground, and now you've gone into a cavern situation. So that could lead to an adventure, because then you could be tracking down what happened with these dead bodies, but maybe more importantly, some other constables went there first to investigate and were not seen from again. And so now you're on a rescue mission kind of situation with these NPCs. Maybe it's someone more important than a constable. Maybe the lord of this town's son was, abducted while he was doing some surveys of local mining claims. So a couple different ways that you could use them: above ground, below ground, in natural settings or in dungeons and sewers, either of those things. But the carrion crawler is a super versatile thing. I think there's one more potential thing here. Because this is a large monstrosity, I'm wondering if you could flip the script a little bit. And this is just a wild idea, not part of the plan, but just taking into account that carrion crawlers can dwell in natural areas. What if instead of a hag, using them as perimeter defense, what if there was a circle of druids who actually used carrion crawlers as a perimeter defense to keep out people from an area of the forest that they want to keep sacred and untouched? Sometimes people with good intentions do bad things. And then maybe, this circle of druids wanting to keep out some humans who are trying to develop the land around this sacred ancient forest, found these carrion crawler eggs, nurtured them, kind of trained them in an almost animalistic way by like feeding them carcasses and stuff, and then, trenched out an area so that they wouldn't infringe on the sacred grove. But over time, because these carrion crawlers were so well fed, and people would come and they would kill them and eat them, the carrion crawler population now has grown beyond the control of the druids. So the druids actually need help stopping the carrion crawlers. But of course, they're not going to admit that they're the reason why the Carrion Crawlers have been so abundant. But that would be something through social interaction where your party could maybe gain the confidence of one or more of the druids and find out the truth of this. And that could lead to other adventures. Maybe the party is like, whoa, these druids are jacked, man. We got to stop them. And they go against the druids. Or maybe the party's convinced that the druids are in the right and that instead of completely killing off all the Carrion Crawlers, they just are going to cull the herd, thin the population, but that the party now wants to ally themselves with the druids against the urban sprawl of the nearby town and the lumber mills or whatever. So this was a great suggestion from James R.A. Woodwright. Thank you. And if you guys have any suggestions or any future episode options for me to consider for Monster Monday, leave comments below and I will add them to the list. But I hope this has been helpful / informative for you. And just remember that these are very easy monsters to throw into almost any mix. Ruins, dungeons, whatever you want. But I think Carrion Crawlers are very useful and maybe underused, so consider using them in your next game. As always, thank you for liking, subscribing, clicking on the notifications bell, and we'll see you for the next Monster Monday. Peace out.